Good morning, everyone. How you doing this morning? Hey, my name is Ted Felix. I'm from Symedica Marketing Research and Consulting. Coming in, I'll be actually the program chair for the AMC for the next 2 years, filling big shoes that Karen Algrom's handled for the last 2. We're very excited this morning, and we thank you for coming out to this presentation. There's been a lot of work put into it. That's one thing I should say up front, is that we appreciate everyone participating as a community, as PMRG, and your participation here, and we appreciate our presenters today. Interesting this morning, as we've gone through the conference so far, thinking about revving up our innovation engine, thinking about collaboration, considering breaking from the status quo. We're covering many of those things this morning, and we're very excited. The presentation this morning is Fueling Collaborative Innovation on a Global Scale. We'll be going through a case study, which we as marketing researchers love. We have Jeff Gustaitis from Boehringer-Ingelheim and Chaturvedi from Affinnova Life Sciences Group. They're going to be going through some great information this morning, and I want to make sure I keep it short so that we can get to the presentation and get through some good questions. So I appreciate it very much. Just one point of interest, we can say that Charu is part of the life sciences vertical for Affinnova. Jeff he's not going to say he's a veteran. He doesn't like that word. He's more of a maverick. Won't tell me how many years in the business, but you can ask him tonight at the reception. So we're very excited, and please welcome our presenters.
So thank you, everyone. We appreciate you coming out to this session. My background is entirely in innovation in a lot of industries. So as it's been at the conference, we're hearing a lot about innovation and collaboration. Jeff and I are really excited to talk to you today about how do you take that from a high-level thought and idea and actually incorporate it into your organizations. And that's why we're here to talk about collaborative innovation, not just on the global scale, but also in your organizations. So from an agenda standpoint, Jeff's going to spend a little bit of time just quickly reviewing the state of the industry, just talking about the challenges that we're all facing and where the areas of opportunities actually are. And then we'll get into collaborative innovation. What is it? What is it based on? And how can you actually use it in your organizations? And then, as mentioned, we'll do a case study. This is going to mirror some of the work that we did with Jeff and his team, and really bring the principles of collaborative innovation to life. And then certainly we'll have time for questions at the end of the session.
Okay, state of the industry. A lot of these may look familiar to you. We have decreasing margins. Our mega brands are coming off patent, leading to increased generic competition. Our pipelines are drawing up. No longer can we rely on those mega blockbusters to fuel our growth engines in our companies. All the while, we're being faced with increased scrutiny, the need for comparative effectiveness, looming government health care. At the same time, we're being asked to get closer to the customer, explore these niche therapeutic areas for growth, and also expand into emerging markets. And there was a time where I couldn't open up one of those first word emails without seeing one of the major companies going through cost-cutting measures and layoffs. And then something I can relate to personally is under-resourced teams. So show of hands, your companies, can you relate to at least one of these items on this list? Yes. This is the sandbox that we're playing in right now. This is the area that we're supposed to be innovating in. And the key to revitalization in our industry is innovation, both in the drug development process, but also the marketing innovation process. And as market researchers, this is where we can play a critical role. As any industry evolves, there's a greater need for coordination, cooperation, and collaboration. And I love the quote from our keynote speaker yesterday, Daniel Burris, that said that we need to transform from just cooperating to collaboration. And that's how we can truly innovate in this space. But again, as leaders in market research, we're extremely well positioned to make sure that this is happening. But let's take a look at collaboration in terms of its evolution. Let's take a look at 20th century collaboration. In the old school approach, the madman model was pervasive. Information was only exchanged within silos and often means as bettering one's own position. In this model, information is truly power. So how can we innovate in that type of model? This is a framework of a typical marketing innovation process. You come up with an opportunity. You take your opportunity. You need to optimize it. You evaluate all the different ways that you could take this opportunity. You select one, and you launch it to your customers. Now, opportunities can present themselves in many different fashions, whether it's a strategic opportunity or a tactical opportunity. So in terms of optimizing, you're bringing all these divergent stakeholders together, and they're bringing in ideas such as insights from qualitative research, imagery or branding from your agency of records and marketing, or clinical endpoints from medical. And what you end up really is with this pile of ideas. And it could be enormous. And we talked about going to offsites and putting up flip charts over the walls. And how do you take all those key ideas out of there? So traditionally, the process goes like this. You take a handful of ideas out to your customers to test with. Now, traditional methodologies limit us in terms of the amount of ideas that we could take in front of our customers and optimize. So usually this is a subjective, iterative process. We take it in front of our customers, we get feedback, we test and tweak. But this process is extremely costly, time-consuming, and draining on our resources. And what you're really trying to do is find that 1 in a million star idea to take to your customer and launch with. But going through this iterative, sometimes subjective process, how do you really know that you found that 1 in a million star idea? The reality is you don't really know. So how can we overcome these challenges as an industry? Let's talk about 21st century collaboration. 21st century collaboration, idea exchange is at the core of work itself. And we've heard a lot about this during this conference. People make themselves more valuable by contributing ideas within their silos, but also outside of their silos in different functional areas. People are incentivized to share ideas, but also collaborate on other ideas across functional areas. So in our company recently, we just launched this new platform called Yammer. Has anyone heard of Yammer in the room? A handful? Okay. I didn't heard about it until about a month ago. It's a platform where people can post ideas, challenges, issues, and then others across the company can put posts to collaborate, share other ideas, or even just build on those ideas. And it's fascinating the people that contribute from areas that you would never think that they would be able to contribute. And it's interesting, even our president has contributed recently, which has added a whole different dynamic. But the key here is that if you tap into everyone's unique knowledge and capabilities, invariably you'll end up with better answers. So you're probably thinking there, it's probably fine and good from a theoretical perspective. But from an executional perspective, how do you institutionalize 21st century collaboration? There's tremendous challenges internally of generating all these ideas, vetting these across the multiple stakeholders. Externally, going out is timely, getting feedback from your customers, bringing it in. All these challenges are compounded when you're thinking on a global scale in a shrinking budget environment. But now Charu is going to talk about a new solution that helps us fuel this collaborative innovation.
Thanks, Jeff. And as you mentioned, there are a lot of challenges to collaboration, but we know that this is the direction we have to go in. We know that innovation is really the key to our revitalization. So what we're going to talk about is how to actually overcome those challenges. So going back to the framework that Jeff introduced, most of us would probably think the innovation and the collaboration primarily rests in the opportunity phase, where all the ideas are generated to address any of those opportunities. But in reality, as we move into the new way of thinking, the fact that you've got to explore those ideas. We're not just trying to come up with ideas anymore. We're trying to come up with ideas that are breakthrough, ideas that can mean the difference between success and failure, the ideas that are actually going to leave your competition in the dust. There's a new effort toward coming up with ideas. And so in the exploration phase, you have to build upon those ideas. You have to truly explore them and come at it from a lot of different directions so that you have a vast range of possible ideas. The second phase is selection. And this is also probably the most important out of all of these 4 phases, because this is where you decide which ideas you're actually going to move forward with. And as Jeff mentioned, a lot of times this is done in a very subjective, kind of arbitrary fashion, where you sort of whittle down the list of ideas before you even take them to your customers. So you're only looking at a handful of ideas anyway with your customers. The risk with that is you have no idea if the better ideas were left on the cutting room floor. And the ideas you move forward with do dictate your success. They set the threshold of what you're going to achieve in the market. So as much rigor as you can apply to that selection phase, the better off you're going to be. So for that reason, the exploration and selection phases really are the most critical to maximize success. And what you have to do in this new model, to be successful, given all the challenges we have, is truly optimize through both of those phases. And that's going to take innovation and collaboration, not just at the front end, but throughout the entire process. So to do that, you need an innovation approach. And again, we've heard a lot about innovation, and a lot of people think of innovation as this ambiguous word. It's all about creativity. It's not measurable. It's nothing tangible. And that's actually not true. Innovation is always measurable, repeatable. It should always be systematic. If it's not, then you have no way of actually knowing if innovation is helping you or hurting you. And so when you want to think about an innovative approach, you have to make sure that it's actually systematic and measurable. This platform consists of 3 different pillars, the first one being divergent collaboration. And this is really the notion that no one knows what everyone knows. That's why you pull in from different team members within your organization. That's why you talk to agency partners, consulting firms, because you're really trying to generate as many good ideas as you possibly can. And you want to get divergent. It's not about coming up with the same kinds of ideas or tweaks on the same ideas. Every keynote speaker at every conference I've been at PMRG always talks about get divergent in thinking. There's a reason why, because that actually works. That is your best bet to truly come out with the best opportunity to find good breakthrough ideas. So you want to be as divergent as you can there, and we'll talk about that. Evolutionary optimization. Once you have a whole treasure trove of ideas, you've got to figure out what are the best of the best. And this is where you want to bring your customers into this process as early as you can, because let's face it, at the end of the day, they're really determining your success. And then the third piece is active benchmarking. This is, again, about that measurement quality. Once you've identified your best ideas, to really make informed, confident recommendations, you've got to know how good are they. Do they beat out what's in the market today, what we would have gone out with, what our competitors have? These are all the important components of structuring your recommendations. Let's go through each one of these pillars in more detail. So divergent collaboration. There's 2 parts to this. The most common part that we think of, and probably the area where we've spent the most time or organizations invest the most time and money, is idea generation. And there's some great ways everyone has of coming up with ideas. Your in-house marketing, lots of brainstorming, qualitative focus groups, your agency partners. Those are great places to generate ideas. In addition, as Jeff mentioned, Yammer, there's lots of online, social media-oriented applications where you can just, eavesdrop basically on your customers, whether they're patients, physicians, other healthcare providers. And whether your company is actively or passively involved with social media, there's no denying that this is an incredible opportunity to understand your customers' needs, their frustrations, their high points, their low points, and certainly get even more ideas. This can aid in the process of coming up with divergent thinking. But even beyond idea generation, one of the critical steps that's often missed is what do you do with all those ideas? So I know, because I have a background in innovation, I've spent countless afternoons at offsites where we sit in a room, we all get jazzed up about coming up with creative new ideas. The whole place is wallpapered with flip charts with ideas. We walk out, we pat ourselves on the back, and we think, wow, we were so creative for the afternoon. And then more often, we never see those ideas again. Or we might hear about 1 or 2 of them. And in a way, that's kind of a waste of all those people's time and energy coming up with all those ideas. And that's because there aren't very good tools, or haven't been very good tools, to organize those ideas so that they actually come alive, so that you can actually continue to build on them after that one offsite afternoon and continue to refine them, explore them, again, develop that vast range of possible ideas. Today, the way we do this is email threads, Excel documents, Word documents. It's a pretty cumbersome process. And when you think of this in the global context, which certainly many of us have to deal with, it becomes even more tedious because now you're trying to arrange conference calls, you're trying to go back and forth, and a lot of ideas can very easily slip through the cracks. The good news here is that there are, with advancements in technology, lots of ways that you can better organize your ideas to really make them come to life and work for you so that innovation doesn't just end with the offsite session. It actually continues through your exploratory phase and beyond. And we'll show you an example of that in the case study. Now, the next step, once you've got all these great divergent ideas, you've got to find the proverbial needle in the haystack. And rather than throwing out most of the haystack and then starting to look, you really do need to search that entire haystack so that you know you found the best needle possible. If you don't, the risk is that what you go forward with is really not as good as you could have gone forward with. Now, the way to do this is to think of optimization. Now, optimization, and the way I'm speaking about it, is really you're trying to optimize a number of variables out of a large set of options so that you really know you've got the best of the best. If I find out that out of 5 ideas, one is the best, I really don't know. Was that really the universe of ideas? Was that really the best one I could go to market with? But if you find the best idea of, let's say, 100, or out of 1,000 or more, the odds of you finding the best concept get higher and higher. So that really is the benefit of having large haystacks so that when you identify that needle, you know it's the best. Now, to get there, optimization doesn't just get you there. You need to marry that with something we call evolution. We all are familiar with that. It's survival of the fittest. But think of an accelerated version of survival of the fittest. So not only are you finding the optimal combinations of those variables, you're also finding the ones that will outlive and outlast everything else in that haystack. That's really powerful. That's a very efficient way to get to those needles. If you rely on traditional kind of old school ways of thinking, that would be a massively iterative process that you would never undertake because of the time and the cost. But again, thinking about advancements where we've gone, you can leapfrog that and iterate in a massive scale very quickly to get to those needles in the haystack. And then, of course, once you've got to that point, now you've got to turn into making decisions. And this is where you want to compare those best ideas to what else is in the market. And here's where you want to use as robust methodologies as you can, because this is where market researchers are the linchpin between the customers and the marketing or leadership decisions. This is where the work you're doing, and we're all doing, really comes into play. So knowing that you've got the best ideas and being able to quantify how good they are in comparison to other strategies is really what forms the basis of a robust recommendation. So what we're actually going to do is bring these 3 principles to life in this case study. And as I mentioned, this does mirror the work that we did with Jeff and his team. We obviously, for proprietary reasons, can't share the actual project or the actual data. But we do a pretty good job of bringing it to life so that you can really get a comprehensive sense of how this works and how it could work in your organizations.
Right. So I want to give you a background in terms of how this actually was played out in reality with a real situation that we lived through. So I had this new product in this new disease area for the company. It had an extremely unique MOA in this space, had a highly efficacious profile, and of course, senior management had mega blockbuster expectations for this. So we had to get it right. At the time, we were 18 months from launch. We were supposed to launch across 6 major markets simultaneously. So when we were investigating the way we can potentially communicate the story of the brand, we ended up with a high number of diverse messages. We wanted to find the most compelling story to launch to our customers to set this product up for success. We were faced with major decisions in terms of what is the key physician unmet need, the hook, if you will, that we could grab them with our story. The best articulation of the clinical endpoints, the efficacy, the safety, dosing, etc. The best way to articulate the functional and emotional benefits of this product. When we went through all of the collaboration of all the different stakeholders, we ended up with over 100 messages that we wanted to test across 15 different categories. Now, in order to collaborate and come up to this final set, we had to go through this arduous process. Yes, it worked, but it was painful. We had to go through many meetings, off-sites, emails, etc. We finally ended up in this particular set. But Charu's going to talk about a solution to make this much easier, facilitate this process, and make it much more efficient.
So, and as Jeff mentioned, there's all these questions. They actually had many more questions than this. And the reality is your business teams have multiple questions. And you might, in the past have broken these up into linear kind of sequential step functions, basically, and gone after one at a time. But in reality, when you ultimately launch the messaging or the product to your end customer, you go out in a holistic fashion. You don't break it up piecemeal. So as early on in the process as you can present that information to them as holistically as possible, the quicker you're getting to your decisions and the more you're mimicking what they're really making decisions on. So one of the things Jeff mentioned is the ability to organize all this information. And so what we recommend when you have these multiple elements, these multiple categories that you're deciding around, use concepts. Now I know all of you are familiar with the word concept, largely in the agency context, where it's really a visual image, a tagline, and a strapline. Concept actually has a greater meaning in most industries, especially in the consumer side, where it's pretty much the gold standard. And it's much broader than just the, the visual concept. It really can contain any of the elements that you're trying to understand better with your customers. So in this example, you can see all of the questions or the categories on the previous page can be actually organized and represented in this type of template format. And any of your customers could, look at that, obviously filled in with relevant content, and understand what's written there, really get the message here. They're evaluating all those elements, but they're doing it in a holistic way, which is very much what they do in real life. It's what we all do in real life. And so if you think about where divergent collaboration comes into play, usually ideas are generated. You might do qualitative focus groups. Somewhere, there's someone usually that has decided this is maybe the physician insight. We heard it in qualitative, that's the one. And you might try and lock that in. There might be certain ways to articulate the MOA. So you've decided this is probably the best one based on whatever research we've done to date or the internal thinking. So think of this as your starting point concept. But recognize this is just a starting point. Because at the end of the day, there's many alternatives to each one of these elements in here. And until you really get that customer feedback, you have no idea if you're going in the right direction or not. And so now the question becomes, if you're going to be divergent and you're going to come up with alternatives to these components, how do you do it in a manageable way when you're talking about multiple people in your organization, outside your organization? And again, that can be a very cumbersome process where you're using emails and Word documents, or you can turn to new tools that actually enable this process. The tool we use, Concept Studio. It's actually an online platform, web-enabled. You can access it 24/7 from anywhere. And the beauty of this is it overcomes a lot of those challenges from the global context that we talked about, but it also gives your teams an opportunity to truly collaborate. So any team member, internal, even your external agency partners, consultants, would log in here. They would actually be faced with, they'd see this interface. That starting point concept I mentioned, often the anchor point is there. And so let's say your medical agency has a number of different ways that they want to articulate the MOA. So they would go into this concept, select that section on the concept that represents the MOA, go up to the variant button at the top. They're going to create variations, and they go ahead and enter in those variations. So now you've actually got about 7 different variations of how you could articulate that MOA. Much more representative of the full spectrum of where, what you could go out to market with. You're not just settling in on one. You're really giving yourself the opportunity to explore. Now, let's say for general efficacy, you've got your marketing and medical affairs group. They all have ideas. They want to contribute to the process. So they can log in whenever they want, together, apart, 5 hours, 5 days, 5 months apart, and basically go in and do the exact same thing. Type in the general efficacy variations. And this is a great process, whether you're doing this while you're watching a focus group, whether you're doing this during a brainstorming session. This is how you capture and organize information so that it can continue to be used and benefit, really, from everyone being able to contribute and collaborate in the process. So here you've got 19 different efficacy endpoints. At the top right-hand corner, I don't know if you can all see it, it says 133. That's sort of an odometer. The idea here is that when you have 7 variations of your MOA statement, and you've got 19 variations on your general efficacy endpoint, in reality, you actually have 133 possible combinations. Now, if you think about that in a larger scale on all those elements that Jeff talked about, the benefit, the insight, the cardiovascular efficacy, compliance, dosing, all of those things, you can very quickly see how that space grows, 43 million. Now, that may sound like an insane number, but if you just look at the content here, this is probably what your teams are generating today. If it's not, they should be, because that's really how you're going to get to the most divergent thinking. And in reality, when you think about all those combinations, without bringing in your own assumptions, with really allowing the customers to give you feedback, you really do have that large innovation space. And in this example, that's comprised of 78 different messages. Jeff, in his project, had over 100. This is very reasonable to think that you're going to have this many options. And the beauty here is that you've got every element represented. You've got divergent thinking kind of brought to life. You've used collaboration in your organization. Now you want to take this to your customers and really identify the best of the best. And remember, this is just one of many. So now you want to figure out which one is the needle in the haystack. And that's where you move to the optimization. So here, you're doing this online. Respondents are coming in, whatever your target criteria is, whether they're patients, physicians, other healthcare providers. They're coming in, and they're going to be presented with a simple choice task. There's a governing question. In this case, which of these would you be most likely to prescribe? There's pairs of concepts. And the whole reason we present it that way is this really mimics what people do in real life. Whether you're going to the grocery store, physicians are people too. When they're looking at marketing messages, when you're watching a commercial, you consider the options and you make choices. So presenting information in a very simple choice task enables that same instinct to basically kick in. And the beauty of this is that respondent selection is actually driving real-time evolution of the concepts. And I do mean real-time. This is not in the beginning, we sat down and did a design of experiments. We didn't decide we're going to show 20 of those 43 million possible concepts. This is the respondent being able to see any of those 43 million possible concepts. As they go through this process, they see more and more of what they like because their preferences are actually driving the evolution of the concept. So it's a very engaging process for them as well. Let's look at an actual example. On this choice set page, you have 4 concepts, 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom. The respondent mouses over the first pair, compares them, makes a selection. The third one moves into place. They do another comparison. They make a selection. And the fourth one moves in. They make their final selection. And then that choice set page goes away, and the second choice set page is loading in. And these concepts on the left-hand side, again, are evolving in real time. These are reflective of the choices made previously. Now, if you want to think about this in a more simplistic way, come back to evolution. On the left-hand side, you've got a couple of concepts that have been preferred. Darwinian theory, preferred variations go on to breed new concepts, and unpreferred variants die off. So you can see the new variations moving, the preferred variants moving forward to the next iteration. On the bottom right-hand corner here, you see the discarded pile of unpreferred variations. Now, there's something called random jumps. It allows us to periodically bring back those discarded variations for 2 reasons. One, you want to just make sure they really are not preferred. But 2, and probably the most critical reason, is the ability to account for interaction effects. And this is all the more important because you bring back those discarded, let's say, endpoints, they may gel really well with the rest of that concept that's now been refined. This may go on to be a winning concept because there's incredible synergies between those components. And at the end of the day, when we're trying to put out the most compelling messaging to our end customer, maximizing those synergies and interactions is really the heart of it. So being able to account for that makes a huge difference. And again, gets back to the idea, you don't want to leave great ideas on the cutting room floor. You want to make sure you've really vetted that space with your customer input. At the aggregate level, think about all those respondents. Think about every one of these dots being one of the 43 million possible combinations. And as this evolution, goes forward, things combine, they recombine, random jumps happens. Eventually, you reach steady state. And that's where these concept clusters form. There's no more evolution happening. It's kind of calibrated. And at this point, you see these concept clusters. They represent the preferences of the respondents in your study. And for each one of these clusters, we can identify the top concept, the one that best represents that cluster. These are your needles in the haystack. So out of 43 million options, you've quantifiably, using your customer input, identified the best of the best. Now, you want to measure it. You want to actively benchmark this so that you can form your recommendations of what to do next. This is where you want to take those best ideas, those best concepts, and move them forward and compare them to what else is in the market. Now, this could be what you already have in the market. It could be what your competitors have in the market. And it could certainly be that starting point concept, or what we'll call the pre-optimization concept. This is what you want to base your decision on. And to do that, you want to use very robust measurement methodologies. Monadic is one component of that. I'm sure we're all familiar with that. You're showing the concept in isolation. You're getting a concept rating metric. And this is great. That's an industry standard. A lot of people use Monadics. One of the drawbacks, though, can be that there can be a lot of noise. When you look at the results, a lot of folks complain that all the concepts kind of cluster in the same area, overlapping error bars. It's sometimes very hard to differentiate which concept is truly better. And part of that is because it's not a comparative context. You're not really comparing this to anything else. So discrete choice comes in very handy. It's an increasingly popular method to really get at that. How do we get more realistic? How do we compare concepts not just in isolation, how good is it from a breadth of appeal standpoint, but how deep is that intensity of appeal? And so that's where discrete choice can help you with that. So this is sort of a two-dimensional version of measurement. And if you actually look how this would play out in a real-life sense, look at this graph. On the y-axis, you've got the monadic prescriber intent. On the x-axis, you've got the discrete choice utilities. In the graph itself, you've got the blue dot, which is that pre-optimized concept, that starting point concept. Maybe it would have been what you went out with had you not optimized. You've got the orange dots, which are those top concepts of the needles in the haystack. And then you've got the gray dots, which are the competitors in the market. So if you look at it from a monadic standpoint, just on the y-axis, you can see a lot of them cluster. There's a lot of overlapping error bars, just what we talked about. Very hard to differentiate which of these concepts you may want to move forward with. You look at the x-axis, you do start to see some separation happen. Very clearly, top concept 2 is leading the pack. But now you can actually quantify by how much. You can compare top concept 2 to the starting point concept or that pre-optimized concept in blue and quantify that top concept 2 has a 40% greater likelihood of being chosen over the pre-optimized concept, or you can calculate that for the competitors. That's really powerful. That gives you immediate direction. Once you put all your efforts into coming up with the best ideas possible, you've done a rigorous analysis on what are those best ideas out of the haystack. Now you're figuring out how do they compare to the other options. This really forms the backbone of the strategic recommendations that you can make.
So when I went through this process, I knew that it was robust and rigorous to give me the confidence to go in front of the board and say I had 43 million chances to get this right. Okay? And I found the most compelling story to launch this product for success.
And so in conclusion, one of the things we wanted to be sure to leave you with today is as you listen and hear about innovation, collaboration, we wanted to give you some ways of thinking about this for your own organization. And there are definitely some principles which can help guide you in that effort. The first one is really explore all of your options. It sounds very simple. And again, there's a lot of efforts that we do as organizations to try and get at this. But if you're going to take the time to bring people into the process, to ask for their input, the quickest way to reach consensus is to actually consider their input and enable customers to come in and help you collaborate in deciding what you're going to move forward with. So these are really critical aspects of collaboration and how you can make it work in your organization. The other key thing is to be able to make those informed, confident decisions, you have to know what the best ideas are. 1 out of 5 is not the best odds for picking the winner. And to this end, because our industry is going through so many challenges right now, the need to not just maximize return but also minimize risk is greater than ever before. This isn't just about companies having a failed product in the market. This is about entire organizations and jobs, frankly speaking. So you want to get this right from the beginning, and you want to take the time and use the smartest technologies you have available to you to get there. And one of the things that we've seen, because we do a lot of research on research, is a comparison between optimized concepts versus non-optimized concepts. On average, we actually see a 60% increase in the likelihood of respondents picking the optimized concepts over the non-optimized concepts. That's a huge differential. That translates into, again, the ability to maximize your success much more than you would if you went forward with non-optimized concepts. So there's a lot of data there, and we have some data here we can share that with you. And then lastly, I'll just talk about timing. Again, we're having to do more with less, and the need to get to market quicker to try and overcome some of the challenges with the traditional iterative approach is absolutely there. And the ability to solve for multiple questions at one time so that you can get closer and closer to the end product that you're eventually going to put in front of your customer, and they're going to dictate how much success you have with it, is really critical.
Okay, to close. As leaders in the market research industry, we're extremely well positioned to ensure this is happening. Charu said that we're the linchpins between our customers, our internal business partners. We can ensure that these divergent stakeholders are collaborating on this innovation. We're also getting the customer involved earlier in the process to help us find that key opportunity to optimize. This process is flexible, scalable, and as I said, it's extremely rigorous and robust, making sure that you know that you're doing everything you can to maximize your marketing opportunity. So we're happy to answer any questions that you have.
Mm-hmm.
across the country.
Sure.
So how did you include that or integrate that into the way you do it?
Sure. So one step is in the early part, where all those regions are contributing to the ideas, the messages that might be under consideration. And there's a premise here, which is that you don't know for sure that every region or country needs to have separate, distinct messaging. There may be a global messaging platform that can work. You don't know either way. So in being able to let your customers from all those countries come into the study at one time and jointly evolve, you can actually identify whether there's a cluster that's just Germany. And therefore, you need a very distinct German message because they have very distinct preferences. You may find that there's a needle in the haystack or a top concept that actually works across many of those countries. So first, you have to allow for that to happen. Once you get those top concepts, what you can do in this phase, the active benchmarking, is when you compare them to the other competitors in the market. As you mentioned, the competitors in Germany versus Italy will be very different. You can do this for each country. So you're really taking those top concepts, and again, you might have the same concept that works in Germany and Italy, but now you want to compare them to their respective competitors. And you can get that level of data, and we actually did that in this study as well.
Sure. Yeah, and again, as I pointed out, it positioned the market researcher as the key person that's coordinating all this efforts. You're the owner of this process, collaborating, pulling all the different inputs together, and making sure that it makes sense too, right? Yes, I mean, before collaborating, a lot of the ideas had to, for example, have to go through an MLR process, medical, legal, regulatory, that type of thing. You can't escape that. But this definitely facilitates the collaboration from multiple stakeholders, even within either the U.S. organization or around the world, in a much more efficient process.
And just to add, I know Jeff mentioned Yammer, which is their internal platform to gather ideas internally on a variety of things. Concept Studio would be really for a specific project where your med affairs, your regulatory, your legal could also have access to go in. And it's basically taking the cumbersome process that's there today where there's lots of emails back and forth and really putting it in a place where it's alive. And people can contribute to it. And again, you select who contributes to it, so it's not an open platform. It's really the team that's involved in the project. But it can also extend to your agency partners or to consultants that are involved in the process. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Sure. Sure. So with the first question, during this exercise, there's not an opportunity for your respondent to pause and sort of type in their own version. A lot of that work is what's happening in the divergent collaboration section. That's where you are tapping into that knowledge through qualitative, through insights mining. So the treasure trove of ideas that you bring to the optimization should reflect a lot of those variations. What can happen during an optimization, though, is you don't have to have those elements in that concept fixed. You can have them free-flowing. So, you may not want the MOA statement at the top and the clinical endpoints at the bottom. You may want it reversed. Your customers may want it reversed. So you actually have the ability to have layout be one of the elements that you can vary up. And we actually did that, had a free-flowing process.
Yeah, just to add to that, that was one of the things I needed to know is what category of messages was most compelling, never mind individual. And by letting it free flow in terms of the layout, I was able to find out for certain segments of my customers that this category of messages was most compelling versus this category for a different set of customers.
Yeah, so you have that freedom.
And to add to the complexity, I wanted to test visuals in addition to that.
So that to your second question, I mean, there absolutely is a brand essence that's out there. There's, for established products in the market. So we try as best we can to have accurate representations of what those competitors are, as well as your brand. So, a lot of times people ask, well, can we just do this unbranded? And the reality is your brand interacts, incredibly with the products you have in the market. So it's always best, as best as you can, to include branding, include the look and feel of your product in the market, so you can mimic that essence, as respondents are comparing them to each other. So it depends on the space that you have. I'd say a minimum is probably 300 because it really depends on the elements and the number of variations that you have and if you're going across countries. One of the beauties of this, though, is that you can have multiple types of groups coming in and doing the evolution. So you could have PCPs and endos coming in into the same evolution, and you can figure out, do we need different messaging for them? Is there actually an overlap in their needs? And certainly when you're thinking multi-country, the ability to have 75 of a physician type from a country is enough. And in conjunction with all those other countries, you can very quickly get to 300 or more, depending on how big that space is that you're testing.
Now, my understanding is that you guys, on the consumer side, you actually use this to help create products. Am I mistaken in that?
We do products, we do messaging, we do design, packaging. And messaging, marketing, communications. Right. Sure. So just like this example shows, I mean, the messaging, the communications, the collateral is probably the biggest area where you could apply this very easily, very readily. There's also really great stuff we've done in the visual aid space where it's also design related, not just the content. And then you go earlier in the process where you're talking product profile. And the beauty of that is, again, you have to get beyond the molecule. So if you're just testing clinical endpoints, that's a different step in your process. But if you're trying to test the context of where you want to go with this potential product, which direction you want to go in early on, you could absolutely use this process. Bring in not just the intended clinical endpoints or the ones that you'd like to get in phase 3, but also some of the other context around this product. How are you going to position it in the market at the very, very high level so that your physician actually takes it seriously and considers it against what else is in the market? So really can stretch the spectrum. I think the best way to think about it is when you have multiple business questions, you've got to optimize because you've got to find the best combination of answers to those questions. And that can happen in a lot of places in the spectrum. So it's pretty broad, but it's really the same fundamental technology. Any more questions? Go ahead. Yeah, absolutely. So do you mean in the optimization or in the active benchmarking section? Yeah. So in the optimization, this is really about figuring out the needles in the haystack. So you've got that governing question there. So you can choose that governing question to be anything you want. In this case, it's how likely are you to prescribe? So the top concepts you get are the ones that beat out all the others in the context of likelihood to prescribe. Now you still have to do that measurement piece, which is where in the discrete choice you have the utility value. In the monadic, you have the likelihood to prescribe. So you'd use those numbers as you feed that into your forecasting or other estimates you're going to make. The optimization step is really helping you very quickly whittle down what is the best that you want to go forward with. That's not the measurement piece. The measurement piece comes in the active benchmarking. No, not always. It can be done for either. It can be done for a refresh of a product that's already out there, It could certainly be done for new products you want to bring to market, and you want to compare how do they, what's the preference for them in comparison to what's out there. You still have to translate that into sales projections. Discrete choice is going to be all about a level playing field. Then you've got to add in, all the other layers of marketing, distribution, everything else. Let me just go to this side. Oh, fatigue. It's very interesting because this is actually a very engaging process. We have limited our choice sets to about 16 to 18, and there's about 4 concepts on each choice set. That we find works incredibly well, but you'd be surprised because the more you show people concepts they like, the more engaged they are. So by the end of it, they're not actually that fatigued because, it's sort of like the computer's reading their mind without them even having to overly articulate it. But generally, we keep it at 16 to 18 choice sets and about 4 concepts on each choice set. Yeah, we do. We have a lot of cheater algorithms also. So if people are going through too fast, too slow, they're always picking the same one. I mean, all of that stuff is factored in. So we make sure that their data is not being included and they're getting picked out. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just the opposite, actually, because we had a ton of ideas, and marketing didn't want to throw out any of these ideas. And I said, I can only go to market into testing with this number of messages. And they said, what about these? And I said, well, it has to be a gut decision. In this case, we would take this solution. We're able to take all of the ideas, all the iterations of the ideas, and throw them in to find out what was the best set, what was the best concept. They were extremely happy with that, because obviously we've done the old way so many different times that they don't know if older messages that we may have left out, what if that was the key compelling hook?
Yeah, and I would just...
Yes, we went with the optimized concept. In our example, to answer another question, we actually put in futuristic competitors in there, competitive entrants, to say, we're going to be launching with this product, but 12 months, 18 months after that, we're going to have other competitive entrants come in. How does it still stand the test of time when these new competitors come in? And we were able to tell management how well it would be able to stand the test of time.
And I would just echo that with marketing teams. And at the end of the day, their jobs, as well as your agencies, are to come up with the best treasure trove of ideas. And how painful that is when you spend all that time coming up with them, you've got to leave a lot of them behind. And you never get to figure out, was that actually a great idea? So in a lot of ways, marketing teams love this because it actually enables them to bring the full force of what they're doing to bear. You get the results, and sometimes you get results that echo what the marketing team believed would have happened, and other times you don't. And I think the bottom line is the customer knows best. And again, the customer's not designing the study. You're really benefiting from all the creative think power you've got. But at the end of the day, your customer is going to determine how successful you'll be. So it echoes that process. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you want me to take that?
Yeah, because it's really a methodology question in terms of the governing question, as we talked about, is, I wanted to know what was this message bundle versus others was the most compelling to prescribe, but also among different patient types. We had to know that in terms of, can we own it with new patients versus other patient types that we were going after, for example.
Yeah, and the comment I would say is, there's a lot of detailed diagnostics you can get out of this. So you can cut the data by pretty much any group you want and figure out, what were the differences and preferences between these groups. You can certainly, at an end of a research project or in qualitative, ask why. And that's actually the good stuff to do up front, so that you understand what is the mindset, what is the thinking. By the end of this kind of process, you've really identified, here are the best on a quantitative scale. And I think, there is certainly a heavy reliance on the why. But at this point, you got to get to the what, so you know what to do in the market. But there still is a lot of data that supports where you can infer what's going on. And certainly, some organizations that are heavily reliant on the why still want to have those kinds of questions at the end. It's really the difference between, forcing someone to articulate something that's often hard to do versus really tapping into latently what they really do. So it's trying to get as, realistic as possible. So you have, let's say, a variation of an MOA. So it's translated into the respective language. So when people are taking it from around the world, they're feeding into this, they're seeing the same sentence in their respective language, and if they select it, that one continues to grow. But it all comes down to the same variation. So that's how we're able to track it, and so it works pretty seamlessly. You don't lose anything because of the translation. It all just kind of filters to the right variation.
This is proprietary, yeah. The Yammer, I think, is a public website that our company just embraced to try to collaborate internally, only on internal issues and challenges. Yeah.
Concept Studio kind of puts it in the focus of a specific project or initiative, and it's really dependent on who's on the team that's contributing to that project or initiative. So it's not an open platform throughout the organization. Well, I wouldn't say that those ideas would be generated internally, because again, you're pulling in from your marketing team, qualitative focus groups that have been done, KOLs, your agency. I mean, so the ideas are actually coming in from pretty much, social media. You could bring in ideas from anywhere and everywhere. And I actually think from an industry perspective, there's already a lot of culling of those insights already. There's a ton of qualitative work that happens up front. That's great, that you don't want to lose. That's where you're going to get the treasure trove of ideas to get to divergent collaboration. So I think that's already there. It's not, these ideas were not, just internally generated ideas. Mm-hmm. Right. That's true. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Earlier on, to help define the opportunity.
Sure.
You're essentially making decisions about your opportunities,
Yeah.
largely internally, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And there are restraints to that. We understand that, all that stuff. But opportunities are being defined internally and not necessarily.
Yeah. That's a great point. I didn't understand the first part of that, but now I understand where you're going, and that's absolutely true. You could use this type of method in that early exploratory phase when I was talking about the phase 2, where you're really, there's a lot of white space. You could go in many different directions, and to your point, qualitative gives you a 10-person viewpoint, and that's about it. You still have to have some idea, some notion. They could be big notions. They could, be variations of that. Put them into this, and very quickly, you'll at least hone in on the direction of where you want to go. And then you can start your qualitative, refine it, and then do this again to get even more refined. So you're absolutely right. You could, kind of start this even in that early opportunity phase. That's absolutely right. Any other questions?
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.